All right, guys, I just want to again talk about, well, I've seen actually a lot of clients recently struggling to load their trail hip properly in the backswing. And obviously that's going to cause a cascading amount of compensations in the downswing that are very hard to get rid of. Okay, so what are the requirements of loading that trail hip? So we need good internal rotation. So what does that mean? So I'm taking my golf stance. As I rotate back into that hip, obviously my knee is pretty much staying where it is. The hip is now rotating on top of the leg and it glides back. So that's loading that hip. Now that requires good internal rotation. If I'm lacking or it's very, very stiff in that side, as I start to rotate, I'm just going to stop moving. I'm going to run into a wall, and now I'm going to have to do something to continue to get that club to where it needs to be. So I might even start to sway. I might start to lean on my left-hand side just to try and create and get some height on there. There's a whole host of things that might happen. So first thing that you need to do, just to make sure that we are giving yourself the best chance of doing it correctly before we start talking about the other technical stuff, is we just need to test what your rotation is like. So here's a good test. It's done by the guys at TPI. Is I'm going to stand on one leg, hands on the hips. You can do this right now. Weights over the foot. So I'm going to be testing my trail leg, which is my right foot. And I'm now just going to rotate around. And I'm going to stop when I start to feel that tightness in the hip. So I don't want the top half to carry on moving. I'm just measuring this hip. And again here, because I'm standing in a square, this is about 45 degrees, maybe slightly more. Now, we probably want to be looking like at least 45, even to like 50 degrees. And most people that I will test will have one side that has a lot more mobility than the other. So for me, on my left side, if I test the left and I start to rotate around, I can carry on going. I'm way past 45 degrees and I could probably even go even more. Have no problems on that side. So I know that I'm a little bit restricted on this right hip. So before I start going into the technical stuff, we need to make sure that the posture at our setup reflects the fact that I am a little bit tighter in this right hip. So the easiest way to do that is just to turn my leg slightly out. All right, so it's just very, very slightly out. If I was really restricted, I might even turn it out even more. And all that does, it just creates a little bit of space at the hip. So as I start to rotate, it's going to give me more range just so that I can keep moving now. That feels nice to me now. There's no kind of restriction there or pinching the hip. And I can make that full turn. All right, so that's the first thing we need to do. Now, once we got that down, I've got enough space in that hip. What is the correct loading of the hip and what happens if we do it incorrectly? Now, if I take my golf posture, now I've got my right foot slightly out, I can put my hands on my shoulders or I can just put it into this golf stance position. If you drew a line up there, I want to, or I've got two, actually I'll put my hands on my hips, just so it's easier for you to see. Now these are fairly level. There might even be a slight bump when my left is very, very slightly higher than my right. Now, as I move, I want my weight can shift to the right, but my hips need to start to go backwards, okay, almost immediately. So that just creates space. Then my weight starts to shift back to my heel. Doesn't mean my toes are coming off the floor, but it just means the weight shifts slightly back. Okay, so you can see that move over. Now I've got a lot more weight on that right side. Okay, what you can also see if you look at my spine angle, it's pointed this direction. Okay, all right, which you'll see a lot of the best players in the world do. Now, What I'm seeing a lot recently is that inability to load the right side. I'll show you some of the things. If I put my hands on my hips, if this hip doesn't start to move back, fairly instantly, and I start to sway even a little bit, you can see with my hands on my hips here, as I start to move, that right hip starts to go up higher than my left. So my hip's not moving back, I'm now starting to tilt, even a little bit. Now, if I brought my arms down for my golf swing, even that small amount, if I start to rotate now, you start to see my spine angle starts to tilt the other way. Okay, now you probably see this tug up. Now they're going to start to lift my hands. It's making it very difficult for me to turn. My arms are coming up. It still feels like I'm making a full turn, but now I'm a little bit steeper. Now from here, because I'm in that sway position, it's likely the hips are going to come back the opposite direction. So from there, I'm now going to unwind and lightly now to side bend in the opposite direction. The club's stuck on the inside. My hips now are coming a little bit close to the ball. And it's very easy, bit of early extension. I can block it miles right. There's no space, or I could hook it left. All right, and that was a very, very small sway. Hip starts to go up, and now I'm tilting that way, which would be incorrect. Okay. Also with the sway, you'll see some people, and a lot of good golfers do this, as a trigger to their golf swing. And one of those is that I like to just put a little bit of weight into my left side to begin with, and then move off it, just so it's a little bit more dynamic. I'm not in that frozen position. But again, I just need to be very, very careful, and it is a problem I have personally, that if I move too far over there, because I'm putting my weight here, I'm now going to shift quite aggressively to the other side. And again, it makes it very easy for that right hip to go up. And now I'm getting very tilty. The club can get shut, and just a whole host of errors. So the other one that we have, again, especially if this hip is tight, is that I don't actually load that right side. I don't actually move over there and load it. Some people avoid it, maybe because they're tight or they just don't know what they're doing. And all they do is just almost circle where they are. And you can see that my hip here is actually starting to go that way. All right, so even though I've got that spine angle, all my weight is on my left leg now. So it makes it very difficult for me to move that direction now on the downswing, because I'm just already over there. And then sometimes what you see is that then as they push off, they now push back again in the opposite direction. Okay, so there's just this whole host of things. So either, yes, it's a restriction in the right hip, or people just simply just don't know how to rotate into that hip. So, a nice drill, again, just to go over these things when you're at the range, just this little checklist. I'm just going to take my stance nice and balanced, not too much on one side compared to the other. I'm going to let my arms hang. And then from here, okay, I can even bring the club up like this. This is a nice one to feel the difference if you are doing it wrong. It's to bring the club up. Then all I'm going to do very slowly, I'm just going to rotate into that right hip so it starts to go back. Now I feel like a lot of my weight's over that right side. And now I just push the arms out. So this position now feels a lot different to your normal swing. You know that something's going on in that first part. All right. So yeah, this is a good thing to practice. Just practice just loading that hip correctly. You can do this in the mirror. See that spine angle, it's very slightly tilted this way. It's not that way. We're not going the other direction. And now we can move on to that right side. I'm on the right side, bump,